So I've gone to a different method here. I need to get the volume up. It was really hard to hear myself and all of you last night, and probably didn't catch a lot. Nevertheless, here we go. So the video on God's reflection is reflected in creation. That's Tony Baker's first video for this month. He talks about ex nihilo. God creates out of absolutely nothing. Now, Baker agrees that God creates out of nothing, as well as God's world is deepened upon him for its existence. He creates out of nothing, and yet there's a dependence on that which he created upon God. So so what I'm trying to say is that God is in fact the creator. He doesn't create out of matter. God creates out of nothing, and there's a dependence on that which God creates back upon God. But God does not depend on the world for his existence, or even as the fullness of his existence. Thus, God transcends the world. There is not competition between God and the world. God transcends. What does transcendence mean? Yeah, far above, outside. Bart would call it totally other. Totally other. When God created, he did so with divine fiat, that is, the spoken word. Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Now, Baker goes on to say that when light appears, it is the response to God's call. Now, I don't have a problem with that. I kind of like the imagery of the response is it comes into existence. My issue with Baker has more to do with verses 1 and 2 of Genesis 1. Now Baker goes on to say, so God does not create out of some primordial chaos. There is already an order that God calls into. And I say baloney.
So, in other words, he's saying it's not out of nothing.
That's correct. That's the implication of what he said, which for me then violates ex nihilo categorically across the board. I think this is, and I'll say this on, I think it's really bad exegesis. Really bad exegesis.
That's not the way I understood it.
I figured, yeah.
To me it was, that he's saying it wasn't this primordial, unordered
But that's
mess,
that's my
but
point to
that
you.
the order, that he did it in an order, that he established an order.
That God
To
had an
bring about-
orderly
yeah,
plan
yeah.
for it.
But I don't think that's what he says, though. What he says is there's no primordial chaos.
Right.
There is primordial chaos.
There can't
That's
be.
my point.
Oh, but
That's
there
my
can't be
point.
anything that existed before God.
What there is.
Because then it would have,
But if
I don't know if I
he
can say
created
it's
out
all
of
of it.
primordial chaos, the chaos was there.
That's right. Where did the chaos come from?
There can't be, if
Yeah, no.
his metaphor is responding, there has to be something to respond,
That's right.
period.
Period. Yeah.
End of story, it's wrong.
It's out of whack. It's not. I don't think it's good exegesis, and I think it leads us down a path in terms of our theology that we need to correct. So hang in there, Nancy.
okay.
Yeah, like
All
that's easy.
She'll do it. She'll do it. So he goes on to say that there is a conversation going on between God and creation, and each time God calls, "Let there be," that I can buy. There is something. There is a response happening at that point. But my problem is this verses 1 and 2. So he understands this verse. Let's see. Baker continues with a reference to Psalm 19:1. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. He understands this verse to be a response back to God declaring his glory. And this means the heavens have something to say. The creation is not silent. So Baker's bottom line is that all of creation is alive and is made through conversation. I can buy into some of that. That's it's a very poetic way of saying it. But here's my problem. My problem is I don't think he is exegeted at all, that's an extreme statement, I know. But I don't think he's exegeted well verses 1 and 2 of Genesis. And the reason is this. What?
Go on.
Do I need somebody to read 1 and 2 to you?
That's
Hebrew.
okay.
So here's the Hebrew. Vaharetz, which means and the earth, okay? Then you have the tohu, bohu, toshir. Now the tohu is empty. Bohu is void, and toshir is dark or darkness. These describe in Hebrew something that is called evil. This is darkness. These particular words describe for the Hebrew something that is something that's dark and deep and evil.
Is that, could I interrupt? Is that, those expressions are used elsewhere, that's how we know what that means?
That's correct.
Not just in this verse, but when you, those words elsewhere, where you find them elsewhere means what you said.
That is correct.
Okay.
Then, relying on the Hebrew, is it saying that God created the world out of evil?
That's what.
No.
That's what it's
What?
coming across as. Because I'm interpreting
Right.
the same way as Nancy.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and so is Baker, and I think it's wrong.
Okay.
He puts order to something that's there. All right?
But what's there?
Evil.
Nothingness.
Nothing is here.
But here you're saying it's translated that there's emptiness and darkness.
That's
and
right.
the darkness is
Something.
evil, so that's something.
That's something.
That's
It is.
something.
I understand. All right, hang in there.
Okay.
Hang in there.
Is that Nietzsche stuff or whatever that Bart and,
No.
and then
It's
other?
Ruthven shit.
So the question is,
He's too.
what is it that existed prior to this moment? And this moment represents in Genesis 1 through 2, this represents the beginning of time and space. Okay? Everything else, and by the way, that is what Say talks about, Bader Say is in the Logos in John chapter 1, that's prior to time and space. That's even further back than Genesis. Genesis is trying to describe for us this moment of the existence of time and space. So how do we get this stuff into the biblical story? Well, it happens in Isaiah. And Isaiah tells us that there was a battle in heaven. And that battle was between a third of the angels who had followed Satan, Lucifer, the angel of light, in a battle to usurp God of his position, and the other 2/3 of angels. In that battle, there is Lucifer is cast out with the other 1/3 of the angels. Where are they cast out to?
Into the empty, void, and dark.
Into nothingness, but their presence creates empty, void, and dark. So it's a pre-existent material, or being, or no, it's a pre-existent state, if you will. Okay? So God then speaks into this order. Because Satan and evil creates disorder. So there's disorder out there. Now, so according to Isaiah, he's telling us something that's happening long before time and space. Happens between a battle in heaven. It also raises questions about angels who obviously have free will, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's messy. But it begins to explain why the Hebrew is using these particular words to describe something that God speaks into. It's because there has been a battle. God has to send them somewhere into nothingness, but their presence in nothingness now creates something called empty void and darkness. And it's from there that God speaks fiat, divine fiat, and calls forth order from disorder, calls order from messiness.
So our goodness is called out of evilness.
Kind of. It's an ordering. Yeah, it's an ordering. Yeah. So, and now Baker and Bader Say are not going to buy this at all because it goes against their bottom line. That's what I believe. I believe Baker has a conclusion he's trying to get to, and he's using this to substantiate his conclusion.
In a way, doesn't this give validity to Gnosticism?
Oh, but with matter, yeah. No, it doesn't. This is
It's spirit. It's
yeah,
not.
yeah. This is not. There's nothing solid here. Okay. There's nothing solid
But
matter
the
here.
solid is being created out of that.
No, the solid is being created out of divine fiat. You're the one who's being Gnostic. No, that's why we're talking about divine fiat. It's created out of absolutely nothing. It doesn't tie God into creating out of matter. He speaks into emptiness, but this emptiness has something behind it that we've got to wrap our minds around.
Then it's not empty.
Well, my question is,
Yeah.
what about the first word, or words, if that's one word?
Aharetz.
Well, it's a sentence, I guess, so I'm with you on everything you said so far, except it looks as if the earth is part of that.
Yeah, no, yeah. It's both and. It's
Oh,
it's a matter of the author basically saying, this is what we're moving to,
this is what
That's
this
the
was
product.
created.
and this is where it's made, or this is how it comes. This is where it comes from.
This
if you
is
will.
the end
Those-
product, and that's
Yeah, so it starts with end product, and then the author tells us this is how it came about. Okay, you're right. I
Still coming
agree.
from evil.
He orders evil. He does. You have to put you. If you don't take this in and deal with these words, then I don't think you're being faithful to what the Hebrews were trying to communicate. Does he order? Does he order out of evil? No, he orders evil to be
dispersed.
to be
Changed.
yeah, to be
Transformed.
changed. Yeah.
It creates order out of disorder.
He creates order out of disorder. And see, that for me is the bottom line. He creates an order out of disorder.
So you're saying really, maybe, and I'm maybe interpreting this wrong
Okay.
because of the spirit thing behind it, but there really was something and we were not created out of nothing.
Yes, we're created out of nothing.
Because it was God's word.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. There's nothing solid. This is what the Gnostics are talking about right here. This kind of stuff. Okay. There's nothing out there that looks anything like this. He's not a Gnostic. God, the picture being drawn here is God speaks out ex nihilo, out of absolutely nothing. But nothingness has behind it a message. And the message is that there was a battle somewhere else. This is all pre-existence, okay? I think this is so cool that the Bible allows us to capture a vision, a picture of something that's going on before time and space ever came into being. And so there's a struggle going on in heaven. So you've got messiness all over the place. And it's God who comes in and orders messiness. If you grab this, it's going to make a big deal, a big difference in your pastoral care. Because you're going to begin to see the messiness that happens in life. And you're going to see the God who comes in and orders the messiness of our lives.
But can't we see that from Adam and Eve as well?
Just tell me more. I don't know what you're going.
Rather than looking for, if this is the point of creation,
Uh-huh.
rather than looking for messiness here, which would be opposite anyway, we can see the messiness here. So once the creation, so the angels' rebellion parallel Adam and Eve rebellion, and so we see that messiness there. And then we have to wait a little bit, in a sense, for Jesus and the resurrection to create order out of that messiness, or at least give us a vehicle through which.
Yeah.
Then why have the law?
What law?
Why have Torah?
Yeah,
Because.
yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah, because.
No, that's
ahead.
my question, then why have the law?
Well, because what is the? Tell me what the law is. What is the purpose of the law?
To have right relationship with God.
There you go.
Right. But I can imagine.
Why do you have to have right relationship with God at that point? Because the fall.
Okay. No, I'm not disputing.
Yep.
I'm gonna say something, and I don't know. You're probably gonna get really angry, but this sounds almost like Rastafarianism to me.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I have no idea what
Before
that
we go
means.
into Rastafarianism,
Yeah.
back to
Let's not.
Okay.
Before we go, just on this point, one of the things I've been struck by is it's very unfortunate, I think, the Western English anyway, the translation in the Nicene Creed is God is the maker of heaven and earth. The Eastern, and the sources, it's correct to say creator,
Mm-hmm.
not maker, because
Mhm.
maker means you've got something to make with.
That's correct.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
And so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was something I read said that grammar was looking at the Latin, and the Latin is clear that it's creator, but for whatever reason, it got translated as maker,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just unfortunate.
Well,
Because that just implies
Mhm.
everything wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, you can change the creed to say creator.
Well, absolutely. No, that's a good point. And I think what it tells us is our inability to wrap our minds around this, because we live not in the transcendent, we live in the immanent, don't we?
Yes.
And when you live in the immanent, this kind of stuff is difficult because it's outside of time and space for us, and that's something we don't do, we don't experience, we have no concept of that except theoretically.
I want to say one more thing, and this comes later in the lectures at this time. Because of that confusion I just mentioned, it allows Baker and others to say, therefore, we are little mini creators. I think I think it bothers me that we arrogate that term to ourselves. We are not able to create a damn thing, or a good thing either.
Okay?
All we can do is make things that are here. So we like to, I'm very creative. Well, what that really means is something like imaginative, because I don't have the power to create.
Yeah.
It's wrong to use that word.
It's
so cavalier we use that. Oh, I'm very creative.
Yeah, no, I share some of that with you. I think we're a little too loose with this idea we're co-creators. Do we have the capacity? We've been given the capacity to create. There's no doubt about that. Creativity has something to do with what it means to be the image of God.
But I think images, we're not.
But-
We can.
But here's
Not
replicate.
making out of nothing. That's what.
But here's
creativity
what
That's
I
true.
think-
No, that's right. That's
We replicate.
that's limited.
But
yeah.
aren't we part of the work of God?
Yeah, so are Hebrews and
We are the
Antelope and
work of
everything
God,
else.
yeah. Sure.
Yeah. To be co-creators in that sense. That's how I use that.
As long as we're clear on our terms, I think Phil's right. And I have been in meetings where I've heard people go off on on the incredible power of the human,
Oh.
and all this kind of stuff. And I think it's a misunderstanding of this co-creator concept. Do we have imagination?
Yeah.
Ignatius would say, of Loyola would say, absolutely, and that's what he tries to tap into in his spiritual disciplines, is that there is imagination, and imagination is part of the image of God, and it represents something of the Creator in that. But it's when we understand our creativity is part of the image, but it's not to the extreme.
Right.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
most, the most we can do is channel what God gives us. It's not
Okay,
our own.
okay,
It's not
all
our
right.
own
But but that's how I use the term co-creator.
Yeah, that's right. As long as we're clear on our terms, it's okay. But there's a lot of ambiguity, I think, used today in that term. If you're clear and you can communicate that, then that's fine. But in one sense, I have to agree with Phil. I think we've gotten pretty loose with that.
I understand what you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah,
Back to Rastafarianism.
yeah. All right. Can I take a rain check on that?
Sure.
I cannot.
I mean, it's just the Rastafarians believe in this great battle between evil God and good God
I understand.
taking place. Yeah.
What I got to tell you though, Isaiah opens the door for that.
Okay.
Okay.
Except that Satan is not a god in the.
No,
He
but
himself is an angel, and that, by the way, I need to at least spend 30 seconds saying, well, angels were presumably created.
By
That's
God.
right. That's right.
By God.
So that's a pre-space and time creation.
It
Right.
is.
It's an out of time creation.
It's an
Right,
out of time
right.
creation. That's right. You gotta. We don't deify angels,
Yes.
and they are
Right.
created beings. And I'm going to tell you one more time, at your first funeral, do not say that Aunt Susie is now an angel.
No.
There's no such thing. We are not angels. That's a separate order entirely from us.
Right. But I can see how where Rastafarianism came from. That's all I'm.
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm open to that. But you also need to understand that sometimes in these quote heresies, there's a thread of truth
Right.
that takes place. So it's not just like that's just trash. It's there's a thread of truth in there that I can tie into. But when they get blown out of proportion, I think.
Mm.
So my point to you is simply this. How do we account for evil? How do we account for evil?
Humanness,
Where'd it come from?
the fall,
Where'd the fall come from?
free will,
Where'd free will come from?
God.
Okay.
Okay.
So in a sense,
Where'd the snake come from? Where'd the
God.
serpent come from?
God.
So God did create evil.
No, God created
Choice.
choice.
I don't think the snake did anything wrong.
Oh, you don't?
No, not really.
Other than
They
talking.
didn't die right away. He was doing he's a clever guy.
Well, that's the point of Lucifer. Yeah, very clever, a deceiver.
A
I mean, he did in some sense, what he said would happen did happen. They didn't die right away,
Mhm.
and they did get upset about being naked and so forth. So they didn't think through what he was offering.
No, they didn't, and that's part of what's going on there. I think he appeals to the base desire, and they took the bait.
And that's what our conversation last night.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, well, we can come to it later. But,
Yeah.
well, God knew. I'll just say this much: God knew that we would be distracted by things other than Himself.
Sure.
Because the world is interesting and beautiful, and it's easy to go off, as we now say, on bunny trails or whatever. Some bunny trails lead into black holes. And
Yeah, I think, but my uncomfortableness with that is I don't think that is fair to the biblical narrative. I think it's weightier than that in in salvation history. So I guess that's my hesitation.
Yeah.
But this is something that can be an ongoing conversation. And we're not gonna nail everything down today. Okay, I'm putting another picture on the table for you, so that you can think broadly. So that when Dr. Baker or Bader make a comment, you can say to yourself, yeah, but there's another side to that. You may buy their image. Okay, run with it. I mean, actually, on GOEs, you better run with their because you're, this is their class, so to speak. But I want you to know that there's another way to look at it. And by the way, this is the way that evil makes sense to me in creation.
Well, and evil didn't come from the fall of Adam and Eve, but from a previous fall, the fall of the angels.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah. So
Is evil supposed to make sense?
it better make sense in the big picture of things, because you're going to be fighting it. Yeah, you better have your mind wrapped around it somehow. Where did it come from? Why is it here?
You know, it reminds me of one of the little BOMOs of G.K. Chesterton was, we shouldn't be surprised that the trains are late. We should be amazed that they're occasionally on time. In other words, this is relative to this point, that one could say that a principle of evil,
Principle of
that
evil.
stuff,
Uh-huh.
is inherent in the creation.
Yeah,
A disorder is always threatened to break out.
that's correct.
Say, put it that way.
I think that's a beautiful
disorder is
statement.
the norm.
Disorder is the norm. Interesting.
That's a great statement.
Yeah, disorder is the norm.
Trains are usually late.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
So
American can't get you to the next airport
So
on time.
Mussolini got the trains to run on time.
Uh-huh.
And that was making order out of disorder.
That's right. Yeah.
Some
What-
orders are.
Was that
D-
good?
Are we now looking then at
Well, only, if that's all you're talking about, yes.
Yeah. If that. Yeah. But
So
You're
you
abstracting
understand
one-
where I'm going, but
You're
you're
abstracting one point from it, so, yes.
yeah, sure. Yeah. What is to be the norm? Well, I think the norm is order. That's the norm we're shooting for. That's what we're doing in each and every spiritual life that comes through our doors, in our churches, in our offices. We're hopefully to be a part of the ordering or reordering of their messy lives.
Waddell talks about is that's the imago Christi towards which we're heading.
Okay, the image of Christ. Yes.
We're born with the imago Dei,
Yes.
but we're trying to actualize that in the imago Christi.
Okay. Okay.
So
Yeah.
we're ready to fall off the rails at any moment, but we're trying to go there.
That's right. And we need the rails, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah, it's clear that we need rails. And so we're moving in that direction. And we've got all kinds of ways to help us do that. In terms of, for example, last night's discussion or short discussion on virtue ethics. The virtues are there, and I'm primarily talking about the theological virtues, faith, hope, and love in this. But they're there to help us stay on the track, if you will. I think it's a good image. Stay on the track. And there are other things there to help us keep moving forward to the telos, to the end, the perfection that's waiting for us in this place called heaven. So tohu bohu toshir. It means something. It can mean something deeper than simply nothingness. There can be behind it an evil. God always creates out of nothing. Otherwise, we do have a Greek god, a demigod. You've always got to hold on to ex nihilo. There are writings coming out now saying no, we need to bag ex nihilo, and I'm just not one to do that. I refuse to bag sovereignty, and there are writings coming out, we need to get rid of sovereignty because it sounds too much like kingship, and heaven forbid there's a king somewhere. You know?
Can I put it just,
Yeah.
I'm gonna preach, on Christ the King Day.
Oh, yeah.
So am I.
And,
Are you?
but you're probably not planning